So, who is going to be the first one to ask questions? So at 9 o'clock, we have a large number of 17 people. Any of you want to ask any questions? Okay, we'll wait for 1 more minute. If there are no questions, then we'll have to sign off. I hope we decided that today it will be doubt session. Just like I was very clear in my classes that there are no doubts. Do we have all the algorithms for implementing L attributed STDs? Do we have all the algorithms? Meaning, I didn't understand. The book mentions 3 for like recursive descent on the fly code generation. Um, so whatever we have studied in the class, only that portion will be there. So you are, yeah. So if there is anything which we have not done in the class, then that particular algorithm will not be there. Right. So on the fly code generation, we briefly discussed. So on that portion, I can ask. Recursive descent, I think we did not name it that way, but whatever we have studied it, I mean, since recursive descent we did in the parsing stage, it's just that we didn't give the name. But yeah, so whatever we have discussed in the class, that we will have. Is it possible to have inherited attributes in bottom-up parsing? Only bottom-up parsing will, you won't be able to get the inherited attributes unless you support those. I mean, in the implementation phase, you need to have the possibility of having actions embedded within the production. If that is not supported, if it everything is postfix, then it cannot be done using inherited attributes. If it is strictly bottom up, you cannot have inherited attributes. Um, so here the question is, can we have an inherited attribute in Yak? Uh, okay. So I was thinking more from the perspective of left-hand side to right-hand side, which is possible using the productions in between. But if you are so if the uh, production is A deriving BC, then we can have, I mean, as you would know, some action after B, which can help C get the effect of whatever has been reduced to B. But if the question is that can we have something which is coming from A, that is, can you have something assigned dollar dollar? I think that should also be possible. Let me see. Right. So let me see. Uh, I'm just going to modify this as b deriving xy. Then is it possible that I can have something which is already assigned to b dot something, right? So that can be done using like this, where I say b dot or dollar one dot a equal to 10 b c. Right, so what I'm doing, not dollar one, sorry, that should be dollar two. Um, so dollar two dot a equal to 10. If I have that action, then I have something which is already assigned to b dot a, and that I can use in the second production, which is b deriving xy, where I can use dollar dollar dot a, and that is going to be an inherited. Does that seem reasonable? Anybody has any suggestions on that? Does that seem okay? If we have b deriving xy and a deriving xyz, when x appears on the top of the stack, we do not know whether it will reduce to b or a in the future. Hence, we cannot set inherited attribute for x here. Um, but Sarthak, isn't this a shift reduce conflict anyway? I mean, in case of shift reduce conflict or reduce conflict, there will be an issue. I agree. Uh, if we use dollar dollar, then Yak will complain. Yeah, so in this case, I see that there is a shift reduce conflict, in which case there will be some trouble. That I agree, because you are not sure if that particular attribute has been set or not. But I would still say that why will dollar dollar, I mean, why will Yak complain? Oh, if the types are different for A and B. Sure, in that case, that attribute might not be present for that particular non-terminal dollar dollar. That I agree. But in general, when you do not have shift reduce or reduce reduce conflict, in fact, reduce reduce conflict will also not create a problem because the non-terminal might turn out to be the same. But otherwise, you should be able to do. Does that seem reasonable, Sarthak? That without shift reduce conflict, you will be able to do this? Oh, I see. Even if you do not have a shift reduce conflict, but the non-terminal might be different. That makes sense. So dollar dollar might be different. In which case, will you be able to use this? Yeah, that I'm not sure. So Sarthak suggests that AST might turn out to be a better uh, representation for using inherited attributes. Yeah, but I would imagine that under most circumstances, you will be able to make use of even inherited attributes. There are times, for example, this addition of this rule, this $2.a equal to 10, this can create reduce, reduce or shift, reduce conflicts because of the empty rule, the epsilon rule. But if that can be taken care of, then I think this should be reasonable. This is very similar to what we do otherwise with respect to pushing the actions uh, in between the various non-terminals in the production. Okay. Any other questions? Can you explain backpatching process? I could not quite understand the algorithm in the book. It was talking in terms of numbered labels, whereas we use symbolic labels. Aren't labels resolved by the assembler? Well, the labels are present both in the IR as well as in the assembly code, and these could be different. It's not necessary that there will be one-to-one correspondence between the two. At the IR, whatever labels we have, those are primarily used for, I mean, essentially generating uh, the IR code. So there is similarity between the use of the labels, but there need not be a one-to-one correspondence. The backpatching process typically gets used at the IR level, where um, you are. So let me put it this way: that you are generating code you are generating the IR, and at that time you are not sure what the label is going to be because you are inside the construct. Only when you are outside, the outside construct is going to give you that information, and therefore the backpatching needs to keep track of where all you have inserted those empty or the holes. Essentially, these holes need to be kept track of explicitly, right? Which means that this is the instruction, IR instruction that I had generated, in which there is a hole. Now, when the outer construct gets, we generate IR for the outer construct, at that time, we need to push that information or essentially check that list of all the labels which are generated for that particular construct and fill up the holes with the appropriate information, essentially the label which was generated for the outer construct. This typically is not considered to be a second pass because you are explicitly keeping track of these labels, and the number of such holes is going to be much smaller in number, and therefore we can say that it is going to be probably very few in number, and therefore we don't call it as a second pass. Definitely not proportional to the number of lines in the overall program. So that becomes a backpatching process. In contrast, you can leave those holes as it is and make another pass over the whole program and then start filling up the holes. I mean, the holes are anyway there, but you are not keeping track of them. So you go over the program, go over even the IR instructions which do not have the holes, and then if you find any hole in any of the instructions, then you look at the outer construct and then fill up the label corresponding to that. So that becomes a two-pass algorithm. Right? It's guaranteed that in the second pass you will be able to fill up all the holes, irrespective of whether the reference is forward or backward. So the labels that get resolved by the assembler are going to be different after the IR generation. Right? So IR might have a different set of labels, assembler may have different set of labels. Both of them might use similar either two-pass algorithm or one-pass algorithm with backpatching. In both cases, it will be possible. Just that we usually learn it in the context of IR generation. Is it recommended to read the textbook? Okay. Yes, it is recommended to read the textbook for the quiz, whatever is relevant with respect to whatever we have studied in the class. Most of the slides are derived from what is there in the book. However, book has much more information in a much more, let's say, elaborate manner compared to what we discuss in the slides. And therefore, reading the book is recommended. Just for your information, that is a textbook, not a reference book. So it is expected that one reads the textbook. Okay, so Adishwar says in L attributed definition, can inherited attributes of a production A deriving B C be defined in terms of synthesis attributes of A? So I suppose you mean inherited attributes of B and C. Can those be defined in terms of the synthesized attributes of A? It is A dot S equal to B dot I plus C dot S. Okay, so I should first mention that an attribute is not defined as an inherited or synthesized attribute. Depending upon its use, we say that it is an inherited or synthesized attribute. Right? So, for example, here in this case, B dot I is some attribute, C dot S is some attribute. Right? It's just that A dot some attribute is defined in terms of B and C, and therefore it is useful for bottom-up parsing. And therefore we will say that this is synthesized attributes, and therefore it becomes L attributed. However, B dot I might actually be defined using the uh, whatever is the B's rule, that might be defined in terms of the attributes of the parent. Then it becomes an inherited attribute. So just don't go by the name of dot I or dot S. It needs to be defined in terms of its use. So if B dot I is defined in terms of the parent, for example, if B dot I equal to, let's say, A dot I or something like that, then we also have the inherited attributes, and this first statement A dot S equal to B dot I plus C dot S, that uses synthesized attribute, and therefore together it becomes an L attributed definition. So let me go back to Anishwar's question. Can inherited attributes of a production A deriving BC be defined in terms of synthesized attributes of E? Yeah, so as soon as you say that something is a synthesized attribute of A, that means that A dot attribute is going to be defined in terms of B dot attribute or C dot attribute, some other attribute also. It need not be the same attribute. And if that is defined, and then we are saying that the inherited attribute of B and C is defined in terms of A's attribute, then there is both ways possibility similar to what Krishna Gopal has mentioned, and then it can become an L attributed definition. That is okay. So Ravi says that this was a question in the book which said that dot I is inherited and dot S is synthesized, and then they just gave this one rule. So, again, this is something which is probably given to you just for the sake of understanding. But see, when we are writing the grammar, we don't specify, we're writing the actions or even defining the attributes. We don't have any way to specify what kind of attribute it is. Right? It is derived from the use. So if the book is saying that it is inherited or synthesized attribute, that means that there exists some other rule which uses it in that manner. And if it uses in that manner, along with this, I suppose it is okay. For example, B dot inherited, as Anishwar is saying, is in terms of A dot synthesized plus C dot synthesize. So there is a uh, so B dot I cannot use A dot S. Well, it can use A dot S, but it cannot use C dot S. Right? So that makes it non-attributed. So B can use A's attribute, but it should not use C's attribute. That's what we say according to the definition. And therefore, it doesn't become L attribute. Doesn't that seem reasonable? Okay. In fact, if you go through some other portions of the book, you will see that you will have to separate out the inherited and the synthesized attribute definition. So if you have these uses, assignment to different variables, assignment to different attributes, you will have to separate those out. Although in our discussion, we always had it as the postfix SDT. And then we decided the order in which these dependencies need to be met and the statements need to be evaluated. But that is not something which the compiler can figure out automatically, right? So what we'll have to do is to separate out the inherited attributes, synthesized attribute statements, and move them, let's say, in the middle of the productions and some of them at the end of the production, right? So that we need to do as a compiler, right? Can also use synthesized of A or only inherited attribute of A.
So in the previous example, if we use, if to define the inherited attribute of a child, we use synthesized attribute of a parent, then it can lead to a cyclic dependency, right?
Yes, that is possible. But then for that, we need the other statement, which says that it is the inherited attribute.
So, but
So
L attribute guarantees that we don't have cyclic dependency, so it can't be L attributed.
that is correct. So that is what. So it has to be dependent on all the statements that are given.
Okay, sir.
What I was saying is that this can be L attributed if you have this only this information, and there is no cyclic dependency. I didn't mention that, but there is no cyclic dependency that is created. Then it is becomes. I mean, this can be L attributed. But if there is cyclic dependency, let's say A dot S is dependent on, let's say B dot I, then we will have to say that there is cyclic dependence. But in this case specifically, A dot S, and I mean, since B dot I is dependent on C dot S, that itself makes it non-L attributed. If we have an action at the start of the production, then it will always give a reduce error. No. That is not guaranteed. It just means that you have the epsilon production. Only because you have epsilon productions in the grammar doesn't mean that you will get reduce conflict. Right? So you might have the follow being different, and that will make sure, I mean, considering that this is LALR1 grammar, you will be able to distinguish. But in many cases you do get, so that I agree, because many times the productions that we have are that the first part turns out to be the same, and then if you add an epsilon production in at the start of the production, then most probably in practice you will get a reduce conflict. So that usually happens, but not always. Okay. As long as we are going from left to right amongst siblings and have an evaluation order, we can have any dependency of parent and child. Can we then classify this as L attributed? Any dependency between parent and child is okay, and going from left to right is also okay. Then can we classify this? Yeah, that seems to be reasonable. That fits the definition, because parent to child dependency is inherited, child to parent is synthesized, and left to right is also required for the uh, for allowing the additional order over synthesized. So yeah, that seems to be reasonable. Does anybody see any problem with this definition?
Sir, Yak restricts, uh, like restricts it to L attributes, right? Because to inherit, you have to put the production somewhere, and then you can only use the things that are before it.
Um, that is correct.
Or
So
okay, so like, isn't it the case that anything that I write in Yak is going to be um, L attributed?
does well, okay, let me put it this way. We have to make in an effort to make it L attributed. You can write non L attributed statements in Yak grammar. So it's going to be onus on us to write an L attributed SDT in Yak. So you can have statements where cyclic dependency gets created. I'm not sure if it will give a warning or error if we create cyclic dependency in Yak, which means that you can write non-L attributed grammar in Yak. That is my understanding. Has anybody seen this happening?
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
in Yak, if I have a production of the form A gives B C D, then after B, if I have a action, then can I access $2 and $3, i.e. the C and D nodes?
Um, yeah, you can access. I think you can assign to $3 and $4, that is C dot attribute and D dot attribute. I think that is allowed.
So, but they are not on top of the stack yet, right?
That is true, but I think it will assign it to that. Yeah, how does it do? I'm not sure. Yeah, to the extent I think it should allow, but has okay. Does anybody have any experience with assigning the attribute to the right hand side variables of a production?
So this is basically how we do the inherited attributes, right? If
That
I
is
want
correct.
to give,
That is correct. So
but
Sarthak
like,
says that it does not work. So we cannot assign to $3 and $4 when you have, or maybe, yeah, dollar. Okay, so if it doesn't work, then I think we'll have to go by that. So,
but if it doesn't work, how does Yak allow us to have inherited attributes? How can I pass on any value to any child?
so in this case, at least the partly we saw in one of the earlier examples that you can have the $dollar being used here as uh, some value being assigned to a production, a variable's attribute, and then used it in the later production when something gets derived from that $dollar. So that I think we discussed previously. I hope that works. So that could be one way in which we can use this inherited attribute. But this specifically, I mean, one way of course is to use global variables, but that doesn't satisfy what we require specifically in the context of inherited attributes. Uh, Yeah, but why would this be inherited attribute? In the sense that this will be non-L attributed, right? So you are accessing something of C and D when you have seen only B, right? So that will be accessing the attributes of the right hand.
Sir, I'm not saying accessing their attributes. I'm saying setting the values of their attribute.
No, we should be setting the values of the attributes of C and D by using the attribute of B. Then we can say that it is inherited.
Okay, so when C has its own production, at that point of time, I'll have to use some negative dollar value to get the
No, not
B.
negative dollar. You can use $1 there,
So, but okay, okay, fine.
right?
Okay, fine.
Yeah. There are other things here. Just a minute. Um, what if it has cyclic dependency? No, it's going to be our onus to not have the cyclic dependency. But looks like there are some restrictions in Yak, which, for example, some of you are mentioning. Any dependency may include something cyclic. Uh, that's what is my understanding, that you can create a dependency, cyclic dependency in the actions part in Yak, and you can write a non-L attributed grammar. I don't think that Yak will disallow you from writing a non-L attributed grammar. It's going to be onus on us to write an L attributed STT. We have an evaluation order, that is, it is a DAG. I was facing issue when I tried this. Okay. So Nishchit says that, but this also won't be allowed. Dollar. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. So Nishchit has. So this was our discussion earlier. So if this is the case, what Sarthak says is that if you are not able to access something which is going to come later on the stack, then that is not allowed. So $2.a, this was the statement here, that should also not work. So I won't be able to access this. So yeah, that makes sense, Nishchit. So according to what Sarthak has observed, this should also not work. This should also not work. So then how do we access the inherited part? Maybe can somebody confirm if such things are allowed? Yeah, so that Anishwa, that should be $2, should not be dollar. Yeah, maybe someone should try. Has anybody experimented with the inherited attributes, that can you access something? Okay, I'll have to try this out. I have not.
Sir?
Yeah, go ahead, Venkat.
Sir, when I have like when is dollar's node actually created? If I have a production A gives BC,
Mhm.
then when it is actually reducing B and C non-terminals on top of stack and pushing on A, does dollar get created then, or dollar exists, the node for A exists before only? Because if I'll be setting the inherited attributes of A beforehand, I need the node for it present, right?
Yeah, that is correct. So in this case, it so happens that you have the $dollar available all throughout. How that happens, I am not sure, because the way we looked at the stack based thing, you said it correctly that after B and C are reduced to, then we are going to push A on the stack. But as far as Yak is concerned, it does allow setting the values of $dollar at any place, which means that $dollar is already available.
Okay, sir. So like I can, if A gives BC, I can set the value of B's
$.
inherited attribute, and then in some further production, it will correspondingly. Let's suppose A gives BC and B
No,
gives
so,
B.
no,
Then,
no. So as Sarthak has pointed out, this I cannot do $2.a here, which means that I cannot set the attributes of B before reducing to.
sir, so how will inherited attributes even work? I'm not.
Yeah, that is the question. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to try this out. But if somebody has tried it out, please reply on the chat box or speak out. But otherwise, I'll have to try this out. I don't know.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, next question. We could implement L attributed SDDs only when we use top-down parsing. No. See, in L attributed, we have both the bottom-up as well as top-down uh, attributes. So it's not necessary that we should use it only in the top-down parsing. In fact, we said that it can be useful in top-down parsing, but that doesn't mean that it is possible to be implemented only with top-down parsing. LR parsing is not compatible with L attribute. I don't see that. I mean, for example, yeah, although we have not been able to use the init. So if we leave aside the yak part, the the inherited attributes, assuming that you are able to use it in the way we discussed, it should be possible to set those attributes using the left hand side, that is dollars attributes, and then make use of those in the derivation or in the reduction of the right hand side, that is the body of the production. So from that angle, we should be able to use both synthesized as well as inherited attributes in the LR parsing. So I don't see a problem with that. It so happens that in Yak there are restrictions that I need to figure out how do we use the inherited attributes. But I agree that synthesized attributes are more natural with respect to bottom-up parsing, and that is what we are doing. And therefore, I don't know if there are restrictions with respect to inherited part. But I would imagine that, I mean, there is a nice one-to-one, or let's say nice correlation between the bottom-up parsing and synthesized attribute. So that I agree. But that should not stop you from using the inherited attributes in the LR parsing. That's what I mean. For example, we are still using, for example, A deriving BC. After B, we have some action, and then that sets some attributes. And then in C's derivation, we are able to make B's attributes, use of B's attributes, right? So that is not S attributed, but we still are able to use it. Right? So that should be allowed. So definitely Yak gives more power compared to only the synthesized attributes. It's just that whether it gives you enough power for all of the L attributed or even beyond, like non-L attributed, that I need to confirm. The textbook particularly focuses on these two cases, which is why I was wondering if this was a strong restriction. The underlying grammar is LR parsable and the SDD is S attributed. Okay, the underlying grammar is LL parsable and the SDD is L attributed. Yeah, from whatever I recall, I think this is more from the natural perspective, that the underlying grammar is LR and the SDD is S attributed. That makes sense because we said that the bottom-up parser will be able to naturally use S attributes. But as I just mentioned, we have this B and C productions happening, and then you have some action at the end of B, I mean between B and C, and that sets some attribute of B. And then in C, after C is reduced, we are able to make use of B's attribute, right? So let's say $1 dot something. That is allowed in Yak. And although Yak, I mean this LLR parser is using the bottom-up parsing, we are able to make use of this, which is not a synthesized attribute. And that means that we are definitely able to use something more than synthesize. I would imagine that whatever is given in the book, that is most probably on the natural part, not the required part or necessary part. Any other questions?
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
sir, when we have IR, so like when I did my semantics analysis and I have my syntax tree. Once I generate the syntax tree to generate IR, let's suppose I have three address code or any other code. So, like sometimes we can keep everything in the syntax tree itself, right? Like we can generate the code and keep it in nodes in syntax tree itself. So, like is it something specific that only for high level representation we first convert from syntax tree to three address code, and then if we want we can convert further down from three address code to some other form of IR?
So typically, if you want some processing to be done, some optimizations or analysis to be done at the high level, close to the source code, you will use syntax tree itself. And as you mentioned, you can keep the IR with respect to a particular construct along with the nodes in the syntax tree itself. But then you will not get the opportunities for optimizing across different statements which span multiple constructs. For example, even to construct a control flow graph, it becomes difficult to do it using the syntax tree. You will need to convert it into some sort of IR and then generate the control flow graph. And unless you have that control flow graph, it becomes difficult to, I mean, a little more unnatural to, let's say, perform different analysis like live variables that we study. So therefore, at the higher level, when you have syntax tree, you can perform some optimizations which are more like construct specific. But then when you want to perform further analysis, you definitely lower it into the three address code form.
Sir, so in the assignments that we are getting, since we are not performing any sorts of optimization, that's why we are straight away using the syntax tree and generating the code, right? Otherwise, first I'll convert, if I was actually generating a compiler, I'll first convert into three address code and have blocks and do the analysis and then generate further code, right?
That is correct. So the machine independent optimizations, we have not performed any of that in our assignments. And your A4 is going to be machine dependent actually, it will be a combination of machine independent and machine dependent. But anyway, so we will be doing it only directly at the IR. I mean, you will need to use IR in some form. Uh, so yeah, but in this case, you can generate directly the assembly code, and because you are not performing any optimizations at the syntax tree level, that is correct.
So it is basically up to us, right? Depends on what kind of analysis I want to do. I can either how long I want to use the syntax tree, I can.
That is correct. So it does depend upon the kind of analysis that we require. Now that the compilers have evolved so much that there are lots of different optimizations which occur at different phases. Therefore, you will use all of these phases. Syntax tree you will use IR, you will use optimizations at the assembly code. Sometimes there are multiple levels of IR also, uh, not in GCC but in some other compilers.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. Next question, please.
Sir, I have a question in the assignment. I also asked it on the Moodle. So the response was that we have like in the array can be indexed by any expression like which is a variable which can be a variable also. So in that case, if we are keeping track of all the values of the variable in the program, I mean we can do that because the program is static. But then in that case, we can just put print statements and not do anything else. So that seems a little like.
Um,
So did you understand my question?
so you are saying that should the array expression be in the, I mean, the array bounds be expression or constants?
The array declaration.
Yeah. So I think the TAs have said that it can be an expression.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes, sir.
so I would imagine that it can only be an expression. I don't think it will involve any variables as far as test cases are concerned, but those can contain, for example, 2 into 3 and so on.
Okay. So, but I asked the TA if I can replace it with like a constant expression thing. He said that no, you have to keep the original thing because it can have any expression. Like last response was that.
Yeah, that is correct. I saw that. Uh, I think we'll have to follow what the TAs have mentioned in case there is any test case which contains any of these expressions, but I highly doubt that. But anyway, so let's follow whatever TAs have said. But does that cause any problem if you have it as an expression? Is it causing any problem in the, I mean, the changing the value on the stack or something?
No, sir. Like the thing is that if the expression has a variable, then uh, then it means that we have at compile time we have to keep the track of the uh, value in the variable. We can do that because the program is static. But like that's it. But if we do that, then all that is left is to put print statements and calculate all the values at compile time. So I thought that like I didn't do the assignment that way. I actually like I generated code for all of the constructs. So I
Mm.
was wondering like what is expected.
Mm, yeah, I think if TAs have said that we should follow it as an expression, I think we'll have to keep it as an expression.
So like we have to like simulate the program and keep track of all the values at compile time.
Not, I mean, see, some of those variables might not have values known at compile time, I think.
So, like there's no scanf, so we know everything at compile time. Like if we want to.
Okay, so that is correct. I see. Yeah, so that I remember. So in A4, I think we'll have to add scanf there because otherwise, when we try to optimize it away, it just takes away everything. So you are right. Yeah, if there is no scanf, then it is derivable at compile time. Yeah, sure.
Sir,
Yeah.
actually you can do it. We can do it quite easily. Actually, just keep an attribute like value and just pass it along. Like change it for each expression construct. Like it may not be correct, but you'll only need it for arrays, and at that time you can use it.
No, but that will only work for constant expressions. Like if there's a
Yeah,
variable,
where yeah, but like TA has said, na, there will only be constant expressions.
like,
You don't need to create another this, I guess.
didn't he say that it can be all expressions?
I think he said constant, right?
Actually, the TA said
Like he,
constant only, but
yeah,
what Ravi is, at the end he said don't change the grammar. Just leave the grammar.
I did not hear that actually.
The TA said that don't need to change the grammar. He said that because Ravi said you need to make it into expression gives constant expression, right? But since the TA said that A4 might be using this grammar, so don't change it. But he said that in the test cases it needs to be constant.
Okay, let me just confirm from the discussion. It's about A3. be changed to identifier integer literal. No, it will remain as it. Expressions are evaluated at compile time. So identifier expression will remain as it at compile time. The size of an array will be fixed. It derives all expression included. Yes, expression will derive all expression, but you have to stick with this. I think what? Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. Yeah, so he has said that it should be expression. I think what he means is that you should not change the grammar now. Maybe he's not sure that it will pass all of the test cases or not. It could as well be. So are constant declarations allowed, like const int x equal to 5?
No, sir.
Oh, I see. In that case, I don't see why we will have anything other than constant expressions. It might just be that he wants to be conservative so that he's correct in all cases. But yeah, I think if he has said it, I don't know if there is any test case which has anything other than the. I really don't know. So I think. Okay, I think we'll get it clarified from him. I'll take care of that. So I'll talk to him and confirm if it needs to be only constant expression or can it have any variables. I mean, even if there will be there will be variables, right? Just that those values will be known at compile time. So I didn't understand that. What is the? So you'll have to evaluate it. So like x equal to 5, and then we have array of x.
So the thing is that let's say you have a variable x equal to 5, and then that variable is being updated in the while loop, and then there's some if condition on that variable.
Right.
So now theoretically you can keep track of the value of that variable, but then the assignment just means that you have to put print statement because you have all the values in the compile time. So I thought that.
Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. So do we say that the array declaration should be at the start of the function or something?
Yes, sir. Like it should be at the start of any assignment. So all the declarations are before any assignment or any other statement.
Then this problem will not occur, right?
So like it's in the start of a block, so you can have like some initial declarations, then an if block, and at the start of that.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Maybe what we will confirm from him is that maybe one of you could just post it that can there be blocks containing these array declarations within the block, or will the array declarations be only at the start of the? I think that will clarify him, because I think he is understanding it to be can it contain variables or not, and I think he has not understood this nested block thing, like I also didn't understand. So maybe that specific question we can ask so that it becomes clear, and I think he'll be able to answer it more positively. Is that okay, Ravi?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. There are some things. Oh man, there is a lot of discussion. For allocating it on the stack, we will have to evaluate the expression statically to know the size. This will almost be the same as evaluating the program. So code generation will have no. I think we don't have to get into all of this. We don't have to execute the code. Only the declarations at the start, like those need to be considered, and accordingly the array size should be known without executing any statements. You don't. So by the way, that is called as interpreting the program. Right? So that is called as abstract interpretation, but that you should not be doing. Inside the errors printing expected declaration should be at the start. Compound statement has local declaration. Local declarations come before the statements. Okay. Yeah, I don't think the TAs are meaning that you can have a block and within that you will have array declarations. I somehow don't think that needs to be done. This is not expected out of this assignment, definitely. Let's confirm that from the TAs. We'll not have such test cases. So all the array declarations should be at the start. I don't know if the block might contain other variable declarations, right? So that we'll have to confirm according to the grammar, but array declaration should be only at the start of the function, and their sizes should be known just from the variables which are defined just before the array, right? So that should be as clear as this. Okay. Okay, sorry, we'll have to stop here. But if there are any questions, feel free to ask on Moodle. I'll try to answer them as early as I can. All right, see you then.